I tell you what, it's not like the olden days. I'm Rosie.
I'm Jake.
And today we're talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which was incredibly popular when we were at school, secondary school, and all our contemporaries used to talk about it and say they liked it. I don't think all of them probably really got it, but anyway, as usual, I don't know the exact dates. It was the sort of mid-90s that it started.
Interestingly enough, and this is interesting if you discover the show and come back and find it out, the first attempt to make Buffy the Vampire Slayer was a movie in 1992, and Joss Whedon, the creator of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, apparently didn't really think much of how that movie turned out. There were a lot of changes made to how he wanted it to be, and the TV series was his vision. He was allowed to make his vision of a sequel to the movie that he wanted to make. So when Buffy refers in the series to burning down the school gym because it's full of vampires, you expect to see that in the movie. And if you watch the movie, you can see the bit where she would have done it, except she doesn't do it because the movie's been messed around with.
Yes, apart from that, I was reading that the whole feel of the movie and characterization wasn't what he wanted. He said that, which is absolutely admirable, he said that he invented Buffy and the whole concept of the Slayer to counteract all the negative representation of women and such things as being either victims or villains. And he said that when they made the movie, it was made too much into a kind of joke that a teenage girl was the superhero, kind of like My Super Ex-Girlfriend, if you've seen that or remember the trailers for that as I do. And that wasn't what he wanted at all. But it was very interesting because I went away from watching the movie, which we were able to do when it was on TV one time, I think, thinking that it had been pretty much the same sort of thing as the TV series, and I think you were left with a different impression, weren't you?
Yes, I thought it was completely different and rather frivolous, perhaps like Joss thought, and I was surprised that it wasn't more similar. But it was interesting when you had found the movie on, I think, the Sci-Fi channel, and were watching it out of interest, and I came into the room and thought, oh, what's this? Oh, it's an episode of Buffy. Oh, no, it's not an episode of Buffy, actually, is it? What on earth is it? Oh, it's the Buffy movie. Obviously, some of the Joss feel had made it into the movie, but it wasn't exactly what he wanted it to be.
So the truth was somewhere in the middle of what we remembered, as so often happens.
Yes, absolutely, every time. Well, it seems that 5 years after the movie, the world was ready to present seriously the blonde teenage heroine vampire slayer, not as a joke, but as a good premise for a new TV show. And that's why Buffy the Vampire Slayer premiered in March 1997 in the USA, and we didn't get it, at least on terrestrial television, until the very end of 1998, so best part of 2 years later. It was in Christmas Radio Times 98-99, and it was going to be on BBC Two. I'm not sure if Sky One had it at any point before that, but it took a while to turn up over here anyway. BBC Two showed all of season 1. They showed it at like 6:45 on Wednesday or Thursday evenings. And then they had a break partway through season 2. It must have been something to do with the rights to show it. They needed to wait a bit longer in order not to have to pay so much money. They had a break of quite a few months, about 6 months, and then it came back for Halloween 99, and then they actually showed the rest of series 2, and then all of 3 and all of 4 all in one go, so they caught up a bit. And eventually they showed seasons 5, 6 and 7 as well. We were actually onto the stage of watching it on Sky 1 by the time we got on to season 6, so that just goes to show they did have it a bit sooner for those who had access to Sky 1. And there's a couple of interesting things to say about the first season. One that's particularly interesting is how Joss obviously attempted in some ways to make it like, as Rose was saying just now to me before we started doing this, things like Sabrina, and try and match that up with the supernatural vampire slayer aspect of the show. And how much success did he meet with in attempting to do that?
Very little. I've got some best of Buffy DVDs. You can get these DVDs of 4 episodes. There's the 4 fan favourite episodes and some supposedly starring or centred around certain characters. That's not always the case, and I've got some of them anyway. And when we were watching them, we noticed that it wasn't really working when Buffy was trying to slay vampires and protect the school from this vampire invasion at the same time as trying to do the punch and decorations and stuff for parent-teacher night and keep her mother away from the principal who's got it in for her. And I was thinking, well, why doesn't she just do the vampire slaying? This is really boring, all this school stuff, and trying to fit in, trying to have a normal life, which I guess Joss thought was kind of going to be the USP, even though it wasn't that because Sabrina had done the same thing much more successfully. And I think the reason is that the main thing Sabrina's trying to do is get on in life and at school and uses her magic to help her, whereas Buffy's school life is more of an obstacle to what she's trying to do. And I suppose they thought it was funny apart from anything else, but it really wasn't. There was another one which we were watching on the Sci-Fi Channel quite recently, where you remember, didn't you, all the kind of supernatural stuff with the anointed one and the bus crash with the anointed one on it and everything like that. But at the same time, Buffy was trying to go out with this oily weed who she fancied who was at school and trying not to make it obvious that she was after vampires and stuff whilst on this date with him. And you'd forgotten all of that, and so had I, and it was completely stupid. And I think there are quite a few other examples of that sort of thing as well.
Oh my god, you killed my date! And then she goes for him. That's supposed to be the kind of balance between the two genres he's going for. I wonder if he does admit that that's not really sustainable and it doesn't come into the show that much later on. I mean, she still tries to have a normal life, going to college and things, and her new roommate's a demon and stuff.
And they don't try to get that kind of humour out of it anymore, or do it quite so much, do they?
Which is a very wise decision.
It's hard to say what Joss will admit out loud and what he won't, because he has said some things about what he likes and what he doesn't like, but then he's also tried to cover up some retcon that you might spot. But whether he'd say it out loud or not, I think it's indisputable that he realised that wasn't working and there needed to be a change.
Well, just now, when we were discussing what we were going to say on this podcast, one thing was that thing that we've just talked about, and another thing I mentioned to talk about was who does it well and who doesn't from the main cast, which is something we've been spotting while watching the repeats and the DVDs, and it does make a difference to which parts of the show are good and which aren't, or which go some way towards reaching their potential and which don't. And Sarah Michelle Gellar, as Buffy, is one of the much better actors in the show overall, isn't she?
Yes, I had quite a thought process about this actually when I watched an episode. I think I watched it on the Sci-Fi Channel before I decided to get the Spike DVD, and you'll understand why that was the first one I got a bit later. I was watching this early episode of Buffy and I was thinking, crikey, Alison Hannigan as Willow can't act. She's acting really badly. I can tell that she's acting, and that's what I thought for the duration of that episode. And then as I started to watch more and more, I thought, well, it's not so much that she can't act. I can tell that she's acting because she's playing a caricature. And actually, everyone's playing a caricature. And in the earlier seasons, the better actors, including Sarah Michelle Gellar, also Anthony Stewart Head as Giles, and we'll tell you all about these people, I'm sure, are playing caricatures too. But then as the show develops, those characters with actors who can really do proper acting and get some proper storylines and stuff to do it with are less like caricatures, and they have more depth, which is why I probably didn't expect that it would be so caricature-ish. But it's really not just Alison Hannigan, it's all the supporting cast and sometimes Buffy herself. And I don't know if it's more noticeable with Willow that she is a caricature. I certainly noticed at that time anyway.
I think Nicholas Brendan as Xander definitely goes on that list with Alison Hannigan, doesn't he? And Emma Caulfield as Anya. She's supposed to be very amusing and quirky, being an ex-demon readjusting to being a human, and it's supposed to be very funny, and just comes across as rather the badly pulled off caricature.
Yes, and then there's Angel, who you might not describe so much as a caricature, but he's certainly in a box.
He's an archetype.
Yes, I was wondering whether to use the word one-dimensional, the compound word, but certainly everyone's got a dimension that is in the forefront of their performance, even if they've got other ones as well. So even though Angel wasn't supposed to be funny, he was supposed to be mysterious and brooding and sexy and that kind of thing, and that's what really comes across. And again, it's quite a strong portrayal of the main characteristic that they want to get across. And then watching more and more, I thought, well, you can tell what these actors are trying to convey if they are doing something emotional. So probably they actually can act, including Alison Hannigan, but I don't know, perhaps some of them try harder to maintain the caricature that Joss wanted them to play in the first place and don't make a very good judgment as to whether they ought to change it up a bit. You were pointing out things about the relationship, the best friendship between Buffy and Willow, where Sarah Michelle Gellar's doing proper acting, and Alison Hannigan is stopping the scene from being a really powerful, emotional scene by supporting Buffy as the caricature version of Willow.
Yes. Thinking about Buffy and Willow, I'm remembering when we were watching the bit where Buffy and Willow are both in Buffy's house and they're getting rung up by Giles, I think, to get told that Jenny, everyone's favourite character, has been killed by Angel, soulless Angel, obviously, during season 2, and Jealous, as we must call him. And we don't hear what's said by either end of the telephone conversation, but we see Buffy and Willow through the window on the phone receiving the news from Giles and how they react to that news. And Sarah was doing it much better than Alison, wasn't she? I think we believed that Buffy had just heard this news on the phone, and Willow looked like she was giving a kind of portrayal, over-the-top portrayal of someone who just received this news on the phone. So that was part of the process about thinking about them as actors. I was particularly struck by, as you were talking about, the Buffy and Willow best friendship, when it was the part in season 3 where Buffy wants to tell someone that Faith has accidentally killed a man and is dealing with it rather badly.
Faith, another slayer who thought she was slaying a vampire in the heat of the moment, you know, the kind of thing.
And Buffy has attempted or thought about going to Giles with this, or indeed her new official watcher Wesley, who's not very approachable at that point. And the only person she feels comfortable sharing it with initially, before she tries to really deal with it and think what she's actually going to do about it, is Willow. And Willow, of course, is in that scene very supportive and just be the sounding board that Buffy needs and the emotional support that she needs to get her head together. And I was saying, wow, that should be a really good emotional scene, and this best friendship between Buffy and Willow should be the emotional crux of the whole series. And this should be really powerful that Buffy has gone to Willow with this terrible burden she has to unburden herself of to move things forward. It's not that Willow is going to do anything about it. It's just that Buffy needs to tell her best friend, and then they can think about how to move on and deal with it. And indeed they do. They bring Giles in to know and that sort of thing. Although Faith has tried to screw Buffy over by making Giles think that Buffy's the one who's killed the man, but Giles knows it isn't because he knows Buffy so well and that sort of thing. But that emotional crux of the Buffy and Willow relationship should be at the heart of that, and it just wasn't coming across very well, unfortunately, on screen. But the potential was shining through, and it was a shame it wasn't quite reached.
Yes, that characteristic at the forefront that I was talking about for Willow is that she's sort of cute and quirky, isn't it? And she has this kind of chirp way of delivering her lines, and she makes faces that are supposed to be cute. And then when Buffy bursts into tears about what's going on with Faith, Willow reacts in that same way with the rather false delivery. And I think it would have been a good idea for her and perhaps whoever was directing to suggest that she do it a bit less caricature-ishly.
It's interesting how Willow is the one, this thought has just come back to me, who is apparently a different actor in the pilot rather than Buffy, Giles, Xander, Cordelia. I don't know if the original Willow wasn't caricaturish enough for them, or if she was even less able than Alison Hannigan to get some genuine emotion out of Willow, but for whatever reason they obviously thought Alison was the right one to go with.
Well, I think she does exactly what Joss wants Willow to do, and perhaps she was the one that struck me first because she keeps it up longer and to more extremes than everybody else. But if you do watch a season 1 episode, she's not really out of place doing it that way with everybody else.
Yes, maybe the original Willow was too realistic, too much like a real person. But what I have been saying about Willow recently, actually, she seems most like a real person, at least like a quirky caricature to me, when she's with Tara, her lesbian witch partner in series 4, 5 and 6. And of course that's what Tara would have been thought of and introduced as in those days. I was reading how it was quite controversial. The network didn't really want overt lesbianism to be on their show. Of course, introducing Tara, she has to be a witch. Well, as a witch, they have to be a bit sort of covert and weird, and lesbians as well. These things come in stages, don't they? And it's interesting to look back and see how those stages worked out. We were talking about baseless relationships and things quite recently, because I was reading the Harry Potter books, I think. That has a lot of baseless romances in it. In fact, they all are. And I was saying about Willow and Tara, I believed in their romance, in their relationship, because they really connected and needed each other at a particular time in their lives and their development. And they seemed like real people, a real couple making a real connection. That's why I was engaging with them as a couple and engaging with Willow as a character more than I had when she was with other people doing other relationships. And of course, they have to use Tara as the final trigger for Willow to go completely evil and want to destroy the world at the end of season 6. Use Tara's murder for that, which I guess rings true with the depth of Willow's feelings for her, the strength of their relationship. I can't say it doesn't now. I'm praising Willow and Tara as a real, genuine relationship. I was watching the penultimate episode, which is basically the finale of season 4 recently. The actual finale is this huge hallucinogenic visions episode, which is really, really stupid. And Buffy and Willow were abseiling down this lift shaft in the Initiative and having this emotional conversation about how they drifted apart since going to college, and they were going to do something about that. And I thought, yes, this should be the emotional crux to take the show forward, but it's just coming across as a bit flat and a bit silly in many ways.
You mentioned Cordelia. She reminds me very much of Sabrina and seems like an attempt to capture that Sabrina vibe because she is essentially Libby, and if you don't know who I'm talking about, she'll be discussed on the Sabrina podcast, but both of them anyway are the kind of bitchy popular girl archetype. And I'm struggling to think of what they even managed to do with that in the first place before they really started struggling to know what to do with Cordelia. She doesn't fit in with the premise at all.
Isn't it interesting that she is the main character who's credited Charisma Carpenter in the opening sequence, as well as Buffy, Giles, Xander, and Willow in season 1. Angel isn't in there. I always used to think when we were first watching season 1, why isn't it David Boreanaz in the opening there? He's obviously much more important to the series than Charisma Carpenter and Cordelia. And it turned out that he was, but obviously with Joss's initial thought He thought Buffy having a Libby character, having Cordelia around, was going to be a really important major part of the show because of his vision of that genre being as main a part of it as the vampire stuff, and how wrong he was.
Yes, it so doesn't work. I mean, in Sabrina, for example, Libby's making fun of the nerds, so Sabrina uses her magic powers to turn Libby into a nerd and teach her a lesson. But then Buffy's trying to stop an evil demon from destroying the world. What's Cordelia got to do with that? Nothing.
Cordelia doesn't even manage to make it into all the episodes in season 1. And neither does Angel, but at least they know that he's not the main cast yet. And when Cordelia's not suffering the effects of whatever's going on and then completely disappearing from the episode, they just don't have anything to do with her, which is why they have to bring her in on the whole vampire secret thing. And even that's not enough, so it's why they have to put her with Xander for a bit. And then after they break up in season 3, there really is absolutely nothing to do with her. What do they try and do with her? Give her a little thing with Wesley that is just very silly and forgettable. Or just have her standing there for a scene being bitchy to Xander for no reason.
Yes, or be there when they're discussing what's going on and what they're going to do about it to say something silly and supposedly amusing.
They made better use of her on the spin-off series Angel, but even then she had to wait until Glenn Quinn Doyle was fired for being a drug addict and she took over his vision. Before that, she didn't really have an essential role on the show, just to link back to Buffy.
I do remember being surprised to hear that in the Angel spin-off, his companion was going to be Cordelia. I'm like, whoa, that's random. She's hardly talked to him. She's not really into this vampire stuff. But then when you look back and think about how they were struggling to know what to do with her, it's actually not surprising because they took her on as a member of the main cast, probably gave her quite a lot of money and said, oh yes, you're quite safe, Charisma, you're one of the main ones. And then they couldn't just let her go. I don't know whether there was anything legal behind that or they just would have felt bad about it. But then they did think more carefully about how she was going to fit in with Angel. I seem to remember she has a role in the show, being his kind of secretary for his paranormal investigations. Goodness knows what they would have done with her if they hadn't had to get rid of Doyle.
Yes, again, I think they struggled to sustain her without her visions aspect.
Of course, one aspect that probably made them decide to put Cordelia with Xander is that it became quite difficult to know what to do with Xander as well. Okay, he and Willow are Buffy's friends, but Willow's her best friend and her same-sex friend and the one she wants to go to and confide in. And then they develop the whole witch aspect with Willow anyway. But so then what do you do with Xander, whose foremost characteristic is that he's a bit of an awkward, nerdy boy kind of thing. Well, not nerdy, as Millhouse said. I'm not a nerd, Bart. Nerds are smart, but kind of awkward and the kind of kid that the jocks might pick on anyway. And I do think that once he's been the victim a couple of times, like the sexy teacher who's actually a giant praying mantis and the guy who turns you into a sort of hyena thing, it's a bit of a struggle to know what to do with him. So they put Cordelia with him for something for both of them to do. But then at one point we were saying, well, when they don't know what to do with a girl, they put her with Xander. That's exactly what happened with Anya, who you've mentioned used to be a demon. Before that she was a human, then she's a human again for most of the show. But then I was watching recently the end of season 3 where they're establishing who's going to stay and who's going to go off to Angel, really, aren't they? And I thought, well, they don't need Anya. They could easily have got rid of her. But it seems to me that they're taking her on as something to do with Xander. Put him in this relationship with Anya. And we were saying, weren't we, she's very caricaturish and she was supposed to be funny. I got so bored of the running gag. She's scared of bunnies and she thinks everything's bunnies. So, like Charisma Carpenter, I think the show actually could have done without keeping on Nicholas Brendan, but they kind of had to because he was one of the main ones. But then, unlike Charisma Carpenter, they didn't send him over to Angel because they thought he'd be better in Buffy, and well, he probably wouldn't have done any better in Angel either, would he? And the other main cast member who we've mentioned is Anthony Stewart Head as Giles, and I have sometimes said to Jake, in the first series particularly, he does over Hugh Grant, as I put it. he does kind of bumbling British guy acting. But then, as everyone knows, Anthony Head, as we call him over here in this country, is a really good actor, and he actually gives Giles a lot of depth, and he pulls off a lot of the silly humour successfully as well. He kind of comes and goes a bit, doesn't he? He becomes recurring.
Yes, he's recurring in season 6 and 7, and in season 4, they make a thing of it. He kind of struggles to find a place in the Buffyverse. They kind of struggle to find stuff to do with him. I think they do a better job in season 5 when he buys the magic shop, which becomes a new base for them after the school library with such a strong base in the first 3 series.
But anyway, that's the main cast, and we'll get on to Spike probably a bit later because you got to save the best for last, haven't you?
If we're talking about people who can and can't do it, and we let Alison Hannigan off because she was doing it in a certain way, and perhaps that became redundant, but she was made to do it in that way. Someone who definitely can't do it was Mark Blucas as Riley in seasons 4 and 5.
Mark Blucas was actually one of the things that made me realise Alison Hannigan could be let off, because, as I was saying earlier, at least you know what emotion she's trying to convey. With Mark Blucas, they've had season 4, which he's mostly in, and season 5, which he's in to begin with on the Sci-Fi Channel recently. And when I watched that, I don't know what he's trying to convey. I don't know if he's happy, sad, angry, confused. He just has no facial expressions.
He has completely dead eyes, which is bad enough for presenting, but when you're acting, it makes it very difficult to try and read.
There's this bit where Buffy's going and finding him in the Initiative, which is a secret government organisation that does like experiments on demons and stuff, and he was being mind controlled with like a chip in him or something, so he didn't respond to Buffy when she came and was going, "Oh, Riley, what's going on?" and that kind of thing. And he was sitting there in this chair supposedly in a zombified state. And you can tell the difference, could you, between that and what he's normally like?
Yes, indeed. That summed up the problem rather starkly.
A couple of other people who probably we should mention before we get on to Spike, who I think can do proper acting. One of them is Christine Sutherland as Joyce, Buffy's mother. She starts out caricaturish too, doesn't she, as a sort of nagging, annoying mother. But then she does start to portray a genuinely loving relationship with Buffy, and when she dies in season 5, Sarah Michelle Gellar and Michelle Trachtenberg, who I'll talk about in a moment, give very moving performances, but you also need Joyce's performance, having been playing their mother, to buy into it, and I think it works very well. And Michelle Trachtenberg plays Dawn, who, as I have implied, is Buffy's sister, but then she kind of isn't, because she's magic. She's, it's going to sound so silly when I try and explain, but she's the key which the main villain in season 5 is after in order to open up all these kind of trans-dimensional portals, is that right?
Yes, to bleed all the dimensions together and create chaos sort of thing.
And I remember when we knew that this character, Buffy's sister, was going to be introduced, Jake and our mum, who used to watch it with us, was saying, "Oh, well, they must be going to turn round and say she's been with the dad," because Joyce was a single mother and there was a dad who Buffy didn't see very often. And I just thought quietly to myself, in case I was wrong, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't turn around and say she's been with the dad, because they don't like to retcon on Buffy, especially a big thing like that. And it would be quite consistent with the show if she was magic and had been conjured for some reason. And it turned out I was right, as I've just explained, but I've never forgotten how even after 5 or 6 episodes where they've been hinting about false memories of Dawn, I know it's always been this way, she's the baby, and that kind of thing, and people who have a mental illness, as we say now, I don't know what we would have said at the time, and probably they wouldn't be portrayed on TV in this way now, but people who see the truth more clearly than the rest of us, perhaps, coming up to her going, "You don't belong here," and that kind of thing. And still, our mum was insisting, well, she's been with the dad the whole time, because she didn't really engage with that level of kind of supernatural, did she?
That's right. And it was interesting when we were watching the first couple of episodes of Series 5 on the Sci-Fi Channel recently, how when Dawn turns up at the end of the first episode of Season 5, Buffy vs. Dracula, they really want to leave us with the impression that, oh, right, okay, she's probably been with the dad then. She's there, she's unpacking. And Buffy's like, what are you doing here? And in that way, it's like, oh, her little sister's turned up. Okay, she's got a little sister, she's unpacking, she's probably been with dad. But then it becomes very clear in the next episode that isn't at all what's going on. There's more to it, and it's a big thing for the season, which the viewers should be picking up by that stage. Should be coming to terms with it during episode 2, and then finding out more about it during the rest of the season, and becoming very intrigued.
Yes, we watched that episode where she's introduced at the end on the Sci-Fi Channel, and it's interesting if you do, once you know everything, watch the faces of the actors, you see them kind of entering that moment of having the false memories implanted. It's like, whoa, this isn't right, and then suddenly it's all a little too natural sounding. So I did find that interesting.
The thing about Joyce dying in Series 5 that I, at the time, remarked on was it's quite effective to have her die of an illness rather than some sort of supernatural thing. It would have been very easy at some point during the first 5 seasons to say, whoops, Buffy's mom's been killed by a vampire or something. They didn't do that. And then to implant this realism in the world, how ironic, because the world has just been changed drastically by these monks putting Dawn in it. But this real struggle and painful journey that Buffy and Dawn go on with Joyce that leads up to Joyce's death towards the end of season 5 is relatable to our world, the real world, much more than the vampire stuff, and much more than the, oh, you killed my date stuff as well, I suppose, because it taps into something in all of us. It's a terrible emotional thing to have to deal with, or to imagine one might have to deal with. So that is quite effective, I think. Obviously, because it's the TV, it's very long drawn out, she's in and out of hospital, she's going to be alright, oh no, she's not. But it's, artistically, it was quite a good decision to do with winding down Joyce's journey in the series, and certainly much more effective than having a fall foul of some sort of supernatural thing.
It also does fit in well with the whole overriding supernatural plot, because what's going on is that Buffy's gradually reaching a decision that rather than let Dawn die, which is what has to happen for Glory, this season 5 villain, to get what she wants, she will let the world go to hell. And it's in that last episode of season 5, isn't it, which is one of the fan favourites on the 4 fan favourite episodes DVD. She's saying to Giles, my mom died, if Dawn's gonna die, this world is crap, it's not worth saving, life is too difficult. And that all fits in very well with her ultimate decision to sacrifice herself for Dawn. And then you think, oh, Buffy's dead now. That must be the end of the series then, but of course it's not. There's 2 more, but then you can get around anything like that, can't you, on Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
Yes, and when we were watching that on the DVD, I was saying, yes, you can see how this was written as the final episode, and then of course, oh, well, let's squeeze a couple more seasons out of it. There are ways round the main character being dead, and indeed there were. Another thing we were remarking about the Buffy and Dawn thing in season 5 was that it would have been better if they didn't have such an antagonistic relationship, at least early on in the season. It's like, well, yeah, Buffy's gone off to save Dawn from Harmony and her minions, but only because Mom's going to be mad if she finds out Dawn got killed by vampires on my watch. Doesn't really seem to care for Dawn and like Dawn that much originally. I suppose this thing they go through with the mother illness thing shows a kind of closeness between them that you don't get to see in any other way. And we thought that might have benefited from more of a balance in those early season 5 episodes. Dawn wasn't just the annoying little sister. Buffy was actually quite fond of her, and we could see why would have been better.
Yes, I think that some writers think that that's how you do a sibling relationship, isn't it? Ooh, all they do is squabble and annoy each other. But actually, not only is that not artistically a very good idea, it's not very realistic either. Not to have nothing else but that. Okay, do it a bit, that is realistic. But yes, not very effective.
If Mark Blucas can't do it, let's just say briefly, I think also Seth Green as Oz in seasons 2, 3 and 4 can't really do it either. Interestingly enough, he was an actor who was in the Buffy movie as a vampire, and he's the only actor in the movie and the TV series. He's supposed to be quirky like Willow, but not in the same way as Willow. And he and Willow as a relationship is very lacking, I feel. It doesn't have the emotional depth of Willow and Tara. And I think the show benefits from Seth Green's decision to jump ship in the early part of season 4. It should be very interesting with the werewolf stuff, but I just don't think he ever added to the show what they thought he should and hoped he would.
I don't think he's got quite as much of the tar from the same brush on him as Mark Blucas. I did always get what he was trying to do, which I never have with Mark Blucas. He was trying to play the caricature that Joss Whedon wanted him to, or this is my understanding anyway, it could be wrong. But the thing that was supposed to make him funny is that he was always kind of too laid back, and when he was being monotonous, he was trying to be monotonous because of the kind of lack of being demonstrative that this character's supposed to have, which was probably a bad idea, actually. If you're trying to make a character of someone who's not demonstrative in any way, it's going to fall very flat, isn't it?
And so it did.
So then Buffy's resurrected in Series 6, and there are some things, when I watch any episodes of those series, that make me think, God, this wasn't worth doing. But then there are some things that make me think, oh yes, it was worth doing, and I think all of those things involve Spike.
If you're trying to think of good examples of breakout characters, such as Cartman on South Park, Uncle Fester on The Addams Family, Spike on Buffy the Vampire Slayer has got to be there as one of the prime examples.
I remember, because I always used to want to have a favourite character in things, thinking, oh, who's my favourite character in Buffy? Oh, I don't know, I suppose Giles. During season 1, and then season 2, along comes Spike. I don't know how quickly he cemented himself in our hearts, but by the end, certainly I was saying, aha, yes, Spike is my favourite character. If anyone wants to dispute that his breakout character and they hung on to him because the actor James Masters is so good, they really can't do it, because he was the main villain for Series 2, and I have read that it was planned that he would die, like the main villain always would, even though it had only happened once in Series 1. It's difficult to put your finger on exactly what he did as the main villain, and entirely an antagonist that made people love him and find him funny and believable, but he did it, and by the end of the series he's teaming up with Buffy in order to try and stop Angelus from destroying the world.
I always used to say at the time, and perhaps my understanding of it has gotten a little deeper since then, but the great thing about Spike was that he was always the same character. If he was evil or good or just sort of hanging around trying to look after himself, if he has a soul or not has a soul, he's always just Spike, and he's always terribly funny, and he's always very acerbic, amusingly acerbic to the other characters, very insightful about their feelings and actions, and whatever situation he's in, and whatever alliances he has, he pulls that off absolutely brilliantly. And that is true about Spike. Just basically, of course, there are certain reasons why he with a soul is different than Angel with a soul.
All the bits I can think of that make me go, oh, Spike is so brilliant, he can do proper acting, he can do the funny bits, are all after he's broken out. There are a couple of episodes on my Spike episodes DVD, which I think are quite poor choices, where he's very new. and I can't really see it. He doesn't make me laugh, he doesn't make me warm to the character particularly, but I suppose in dribs and drabs throughout the series, his brilliance must have shone through the rather standard material that they gave him to work with. Now, it's established right from the pilot episode. It's one of those pilots that's remade into a first episode, which we've seen the part of the series one. I read about the half-hour first pilot. It sounds like it's pretty much exactly the same anyway, but they established right from there that when you become a vampire, you no longer have your soul, the demon takes you over, and that was Joss Whedon's vampire lore that he made up, and he made up the characters Angel and Angelus to go with it. And then because Spike was the character that everyone fell in love with without his soul, he couldn't be changed. So, he made up this whole thing where Angel's a good vampire, he's got his soul, he loses his soul, he's totally different, he's the most evil. Then you have to do something different for, okay, here's a vampire character that everyone loves. Perhaps he should have his soul. So that's why he is so much the same character. And I read a comment on a YouTube video, I think, that somebody hates that because it totally undermines the vampire lore that they have set up. And that's a valid view if you're going to care about that kind of thing, which I don't very much. I think Spike works very well indeed.
And interestingly enough, right from the beginning, and I remember commenting on this while we were watching Series 2 first off, before Spike really had any sort of development, Spike and Drew, the love and loyalty they had for each other, were kind of at odds with Joss Whedon's vampire lore already. And really, Spike developing from there isn't at all surprising. Perhaps Joss was coming to realise even during season 2 that his idea of what a vampire is and the extent to which it can feel and love was rather limiting and was going to need to be fiddled around with.
I'm going to suggest that the Spike and Drusilla relationship was initially fueled in the planning stages by the kind of dynamic they wanted them to have with Angelus. Angelus sired Drusilla, we find out during that series, and then they decide Drusilla sired Spike. Initially, Spike refers to Angel as his sire, and Joss Whedon says, oh, he just means his mentor. Yeah, all right, Joss, we know that you thought he was his sire. But anyway, a thing that they do quite a lot is have Spike be jealous when Angelus comes along and starts being more evil than him and taking Drusilla's attention from him. And so maybe the initial thought was that they'd set up this very physical, because it is, and emotional and quite sort of symbiotic relationship between them in order to fuel that jealousy. But then the actors, and I include Juliet Landau as Drusilla in this because she's good too, not as good as James Masters, brought more to the relationship than perhaps Joss Whedon was expecting.
And isn't it ironic in that case that really the making of Spike as a character in himself and as such a mainstay of the show is that when he comes back for a guest episode in season 3, the only reason that Drew isn't with him is Juliet Landau wasn't available. And yet that showcases Spike in the role he will have until the end of the series on his own, saying to the main characters why they're being stupid and hypocritical and making us laugh about it.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of Harry Enfield talking about being in the first series and then behaving badly. He said, it couldn't have started without me and it couldn't have continued with me. I think Spike, certainly the character that they developed, and from where he started, it's very much the same sort of thing with Drusilla. And I remember being happy they were going to bring him back for a Series 3 episode. And actually, that's on my Spike DVD. It's actually not very well conceived, we thought, did we? It's rather forcey, it's rather shoehorned into the series, and yet James Masters makes it work with his performance. And then I was very pleased when I found out, I don't remember how I found out, probably Jake found out first and told me, that's what usually happens with that kind of thing. He was going to be a regular character in season 4, and I think we were all thinking, well, how is that going to work then? He's not going to be the villain. We don't want him as a villain. We want him as a protagonist in that season 3 episode. He's teaming up with Buffy and Angel for various reasons. So we were probably wondering how that was going to work, as he is a vampire and he is evil. So then we link back to the initiative. I mentioned how they do these experiments on demons, and they plant a chip in his head that causes him terrible agony that is beyond imagining whenever he tries to harm someone. And I do remember thinking, oh yes, I see how this is going to work. He's not going to like it for a time and go around being annoyed about it and then gradually team up with the protagonists and become their ally and perhaps later on their friend. And I was pretty much right about that.
When we watched The Gift, the season 5 finale, and the evil Harbinger Glory, Harbinger character says about Spike, why are you acting with the good guys? No sniff of a soul. I say, well, I think he should have earned his soul back by this point. And then you say, well, that's not how things work in the Buffyverse, and they don't want to give us any hint that it might be. I mean, if Angel's searching for redemption by helping people, and he's got his soul in him, Spike should have found redemption doing it all as a soulless vampire, and by then he is extremely fond of Buffy and Dawn and has gone to great pains to protect them from Glory. I think he should go in search of his soul at the end of season 6, and the guy says, oh, look, it's already there.
Yes, Joss doesn't want to change his vampire law, though, does he? Angel's had his soul returned to him by magic and the spell broken because it was a spell a couple of times. And, you know, it's kind of like a battery, isn't it? A soul to a vampire. It's either in or it's out. And, yes, Joss didn't want to change that. So even though he didn't want to mess about with the term soul and how it works, it is consistent with Spike's character. As you said, he begins as a vampire who clearly is capable of love and has real feelings. That those feelings kind of develop, especially when he can't be evil and he has to team up with the good guys. So he has a kind of soul in that respect, doesn't he, by the time he's going to try and save Dawn on the top of that structure from getting killed. But not the kind of soul where you take it in and out like a battery.
Yes, it shouldn't happen at all, should it, in Joss's law, that a vampire goes looking to get its soul back and goes through all these trials to get it, which is what Spike does at the end of season 6. So yes, he's got a soul and a heart as well, however you want to express it. What's interesting about season 6 and Buffy and Spike is that Spike discovers he can attack Buffy if he wants to without his chip going off after she's been rebuilt and resurrected. But at that point, he doesn't want to attack her. He's trying to have a relationship with her. And there are some aspects of this relationship that might not be so good for Buffy. He kind of comes between her and her friends, but then she's already got this kind of rift between her and her friends after being resurrected, and she feels that Spike's really the only one that understands her. It all gets a bit weird, but it ends up with Buffy saying to Spike, oh, what am I doing? I can't possibly feel these things for you. You're a soulless monster, which is why he says, right, I'm gonna go off and get made what I was and sort myself out. And we think he's going off to make himself properly evil again, but it turns out he's gone off to ask for his soul back, so Buffy won't think he's a soulless monster. I mean, crikey, what a paradox. But fortunately, whatever Spike's up to, whatever his motivation, however Buffy or anyone feels about him, he's always great to watch.
Yes, the character is English, and on my Spike DVD you get a little documentary where the actor talks about being in the show, and Joss Whedon says a few things, and a couple of his main writers talk about the character. And James Masters, actually, you know, I don't like him with his real voice. It sounds all wrong, his American voice. I like his imperfect English accent. But he was telling me that he had no accent training. So any mistakes he does make, he really can't be held accountable. As I've said before, you just can't do it without accent training. You don't know. But he said that he modelled himself initially, or his accent, on a man who he was in a play with, who was from London, which is better than nothing, isn't it? And another thing he said was that he felt the accent got better as the show progressed, and he's absolutely right. In season 2, there's a lot wrong with it. By season 4, it is a lot better, but he's still saying bloody instead of bloody, as we say down here in the south. And then by season 7, I've got one season 7 episode on one of those DVDs. It's a Spike episode on the Giles DVD, actually. It's pretty much flawless, just in the sense that you can tell he hasn't quite got the natural register of the English accent. So he was quite right there, and very probably he started modelling it more on Anthony Stewart Head. Certainly would make sense if that's what he did.
When it emerged that Buffy was not coming back after season 7, which I think was a lot to do with Sarah having had enough of Last, but also wasn't getting as good ratings and they'd reached probably the right place to stop.
Yes, everyone was probably finding Andrew particularly annoying, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, they really should have stopped 2 seasons before, but then, we wouldn't have got half as much Spike as we did. But when I read that it was ending anyway, and Angel was continuing, at least for now, as it turned out, Angel did get cancelled after a further season. I was very pleased to read as well that James Marsters had signed up as a regular cast member for season 5 of Angel, so he'd be moving shows. And I thought, oh yes, if there's anyone who should swap shows, it's definitely him. So then when Spike's final emotional sacrifice comes in the final episode of Buffy, it's like, well, this is a correct end to his journey. Buffy says to him she loves him, and he says, no, you don't. But thanks for saying it, and things like that. You think, well, we can really have our cake and eat it too, because we've got this ending of Spike's journey in Buffy that we should be having. But we know he's going to come back to life for Angel, and we're going to get another season of it. And boy, howdy, was that worth having. Yes, it was.
Yes, I remember finding that quite a comfort, knowing that he was going to reappear and be in Angel, otherwise I don't think I could have borne it. Andrew, by the way, is that nerdy boy character who I've said never worked when I was talking about Miles and Sabrina, I think. Very annoying, but I really don't have anything else to say about him. Just that he's hanging about season 7 and they're trying to squeeze a lot of humour out of him, but actually there isn't any in him at all.
As for Angel, the show itself, it was rather badly treated by terrestrial British TV. Channel 4 had it, but they chopped out so much of it, even with the adverts. It finished about 25 minutes before it was supposed to at one point, and made me go around changing all the clocks, because I said all the clocks must stop. But no, it was because they cut out so much material. I don't think they even had it past season 2. We managed to catch seasons 3, 4 and 5 on Sky 1. And at the time it was first on in America, which was to go alongside season 4 of Buffy, as should have been obvious from what we were saying earlier about various things. People were saying, apparently, in the USA that Angel was a better show than Buffy. And, well, season 4, as we were also saying, in many ways, is a very low point for Buffy. I think perhaps Angel was better at that point.
Yes, at that point, but I do remember even at the time saying, well, I don't think it's better than Buffy's ever been. Is that what these people mean, that it's better than Buffy's ever been, or do they just mean it's better than Buffy now? But actually I think it was sort of a bit of both. These fans, they sort of don't realise, do they, when things have got worse, because they don't want them to be worse. They just think that they're watching the same show that they've always watched. So to watch season 1 of Angel alongside season 4 of Buffy, and to think, oh, I'm enjoying Angel more, that brings them to the conclusion that Angel is better than Buffy.
It's a very reactionary thing to say, and yes, it's very typical of the sort of things that do get said online. I mean, I think Angel goes downhill rather badly during seasons 2, 3 and 4. And then season 5 was a bit of a breath of fresh air. New bass with Wolfram and Hart going on. Spike being there regularly is always a good thing.
Not so very long ago I found a compilation clips video on YouTube, by the way, of funny Angel and Spike moments. I don't know if it's still there, how easy it is to find if you do want to watch it, but it did make me laugh. And all the times I laughed, it was Spike saying something. And all the times I thought, ugh, it was Angel saying something.
Angel did kind of suffer from ending up with a lot of Buffy cast-offs in it, and thus have less of its own identity than it could have had. And that's one reason why it was a shame that Doyle, Glenn Quinn, didn't hang around for more than half a season and couldn't be relied on to turn up for work. Was replaced with Wesley.
I remember saying the same day that Wesley came along. What a shame. Now there's no Angel character who's Angel only in the cast. They're all Buffy cast-offs. So then I was quite glad when some other regular cast members came along. Amy Acker as Fred, a girl called Fred, and Gunn, and I know his name, but I've forgotten it.
Yes, J. August Richards.
That's it.
He was introduced towards the end of season 1, so perhaps they kind of realised, right, we're going to carry on with the show, it's been renewed, we do need a regular who's not a Buffy cast-off, let's introduce one here and develop him in season 2, and that's what they did. My favourite non-Buffy character who they did introduce at the beginning of season 2 of Angel was Lorne, who didn't have a name for a while. He was the host of this demon bar. And then in season 2, two-part finale, you found out his name, which was Krevlon Swath, the Deathlock Clan, and Lorne for short. And I always enjoyed him. He had the power to read people's souls while they were singing.
And then they would do karaoke at his bar if they wanted him to read their souls. Was it karaoke, or was it just like kind of open mic? Perhaps it wasn't actual karaoke.
And he did join Angel investigations at one point after his bar was, destroyed, and he was a good character to develop in the show, I think. Lots of fun demon makeup. He was played by an actor and singer called Andy Hallett, who died very sadly, prematurely a few years ago.
I do remember finding it funny at the time. I don't know if I would now. The running gag that when Angel wants his soul read, he would sing Mandy quite badly. And I think that's one thing, certainly at the time, David Boreanaz managed to pull off. Now, surely Lorne wasn't really intended to become a regular cast member. I suspect he was only supposed to have his bar and do the soul reading from time to time. And what makes me say that more than anything really is that he's the only regular character who needs to have full-on demon makeup each episode. And I can't imagine that they would have sat down at their story meetings and stuff and said, right, let's have a regular demon character who has to be in a load of makeup all the time. It would just be too much trouble, wouldn't it? So, like with Spike, although he's not quite as good, they realised they needed to have him as a regular character when they realised what an asset he was.
Yes, he is something of a breakout character. It's easy, as we've kind of done here, to include Angel the show as a kind of footnote to Buffy with a bit of cross-referencing. And I do think, as I say, it's reactionary and rather narrow-minded and unfair to say that Angel is better than Buffy, but is Buffy a lot better than Angel? I don't know. They both have their pluses and minuses.
I think at their best, they're probably about the same. Having said that, I think I prefer, at any one time even, the ensemble in Angel. There's always someone in the Buffy cast that I find annoying, but I don't remember having that problem with Angel. Having said that, I haven't seen any episodes of Angel recently, so I might change my mind. But Angel, okay, he was a little bit annoying in Buffy, but he's alright. Doyle, Cordelia works better in Angel. Fred, Gunn, Lorne, Wesley, I don't remember having a problem with any of them. So I do think Angel had a lot going for it, and Cordelia didn't fit in with Buffy, as we said, but the bits of Angel I do remember laughing at. Many of them involved her. And I think she can do proper acting, and I think she could do proper emotional scenes when the occasion calls for it.
Yes, and that final episode with her in season 5, where she comes back as a spirit, just to make sure Angel's on the right course, is rather well done, I think.
Is that the same one where she's greeting Gunn and saying to him something like, wow, you have hair? he says, "Why did you think I was prematurely bald? Like, that's the stupidest idea." And then the face that she does, and, I'm not that good at showing you things with my voice. Obviously, I can't show you the face she does, but the way she reacts, it's like, oh yeah, I did think that actually, was laugh out loud funny at the time.
Yes, I'm sure it is that episode.
The other one is when there's been a spell where everyone's lost their memory, or a certain portion of their memory, so they think that they're a different age and at a different period in their life than they are. And Angel doesn't know he's a vampire and goes and looks in the mirror, and then you know what would happen then. Comes back to Cordelia and goes, "I'm invisible." And she goes, "No, you're not." Which is exactly the way you feel that you would react if someone came up to you that you could see perfectly well saying, "I'm invisible." She just got that line exactly right. So those are a couple of my favourite Angel memories there, both involving Charisma Carpenter.
So it certainly wouldn't be right to do a Buffy podcast without mentioning Angel and good points about Angel and giving it its due as well. And I think given that it took Angel and Cordelia out of Buffy and gave them a bit more point in the Buffyverse, it was certainly well worth doing for that, and they did well to sustain it as much as they did.
One more thing I thought of saying just now, I was mulling over, right, what have we got this time? There was a thing that really used to annoy me, and when I think about it, it still does, even though I don't care about Buffy as much as I used to. We mentioned Faith, another Slayer. She's a replacement for Kendra, another Slayer, who was killed in season 2.
Yes, the first half of the season 2 finale, the end of the first half.
And the folklore that Joss Whedon made up is that there is a Slayer. When she dies, another Slayer is called. And what happens at the end of season 1 is that Buffy is drowned briefly in this scene where Xander is coming along and giving her CPR, and Angel's there and he's saying to Xander, "You have to do it. I have no breath," he says. Which I find very memorable. It's slightly beside the point, though. The point is that Buffy drowned, and then in season 2, Kendra turns up saying, "I'm the Vampire Slayer," and we're like, "Whoa, what? No way, Buffy's a Slayer." And then it turns out that she was called when Buffy died. So then doesn't it make sense that when Buffy has properly been killed and she's not just merely dead, she's really most sincerely dead at the end of season 5, so dead that she has been buried and in fact begun to rot away, I seem to remember, a third Slayer would be called. But no, there isn't one, and that just always bugged me. They kind of wanted Kendra and then Faith for the plot, didn't they? And then it was too much trouble to have a third Slayer for the plot, so they didn't have one. Of course, at that point, Xander is just kind of jealous of Angel. And, Xander fancies Buffy. Well, Xander kind of fancies everyone, and Angel's having this ship with Buffy. But it did strike me, another thing when we were watching it on the Sci-Fi Channel, early Xander in particular, I think he's probably got over it by about season 3, but he's just jealous of any other male that turns up. An old friend of Buffy's, someone who fancies Buffy, someone who doesn't fancy Buffy, or Willow, someone she's met before, someone no one's ever met before. He's just jealous and, "Oh, go away, get away from Buffy, get away from Willow." Very annoying, a lot like Maeve is in The Adventures of Sinbad with other women. So I suppose that's sort of subversion again, isn't it, of gender roles in fiction. But we've been saying a lot of things that are really quite negative about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and also a lot of things that are really quite positive. But as I think I said earlier, at the time, everyone at school and we were really into it, and I think the appeal was this very kind of unique folklore and all these overriding storylines that they would give us, and they would make us really want to know what was going to happen next and make the supernatural aspect really intriguing. Like, we really wanted to know what was going to happen to Dawn. We really wanted to know whether Angel was going to get his soul back and all that kind of thing. And once you know the answers and you look back in the cold light of day, some of that has rather lost its charm, and you do notice the annoying things a bit more.
Join us again next time, which will be the final Sunday in April, for a podcast on Blackadder. which I think is actually the first time we're going to be doing a BBC sitcom podcast. There's a few BBC sitcoms that we will podcast about at some point, and Blackadder is the lucky one that's going to get the treatment first. So join us again for that. Until then,
good night out there.
Whatever you are.